Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and you've tuned in to arguably the most exciting tank review of the year. You are looking at the first tier 9 German premium heavy tank. It is the Tiger Mouse. I mean, how much more exciting can a name get? This will be inside Holiday Ops 2024 loot crate, and so I guess you're going to have to get rolling the dice if you want to be able to pick this one up. And I think a lot of people will want to, as this is arguably the new best tier 9 premium heavy tank. Or is it? I guess that's what my job is, to break it down. So before we jump into the gameplay, let's take a look at its stats. So I'm going to be comparing the Tiger Mouse to the other three German tier 9 heavy tanks, the Moistion, the E75 and the VK4502B. So immediately we notice that the Tiger Mouse has a damage per minute advantage at 2050. Not the highest for a tier 9 heavy tank, but definitely not bad, and a touch better than the E75. And as we can see in this comparison, not all of these 128mm caliber guns are equal, with the E75 and the Tiger Mouse having 530 alpha damage, while the Moistion and the VK4502B having 490. Apart from that, all of these vehicles use the same ammunition. 246 standard pen, 311 gold pen, which will help you for your bad matchups. The Tiger Mouse also has the most ammunition in this comparison, so you really can take pretty much a third AP, a third APCR, and a third HE and get away with it. You're hardly ever, unless you're permanently firing, going to get through even one of those types of ammunition in the battle. So now onto the gun handling. Tiger Mouse, 2.4 seconds aim time, not bad. 0.37 accuracy, the same as pretty much all of the other vehicles in this comparison. And the gun handling on this tank is the best when moving, but average when turning the turret, worse than the Moistion but better than the VK. Now what sucks about this tank is compared to the Moistion and the E75, it only has 7 degrees of gun depression, which definitely impacts how flexible this vehicle will be at getting its gun down on a ridgeline. But it is still way better than the VK4502B, which is another one of those rear turret positions. So onto the mobility of the Tiger Mouse. It's not bad news here. This tank weighs 120 tons, so while it's not close to the Moistion's girthy 170 tons, it makes the E75 and the VK look like medium tanks rather than like true heavies. Accordingly, that means that with a 32km/h top speed limit, which you can improve with field mods on this tank, that you can ram really hard in this vehicle. So I expect a lot of you out there will take controlled impact and go and see what happens when a 120-ton tank crashes into a tier 7 medium, right? Yeah, it should be one of your goals. In addition to this great top speed limit, the vehicle has a great reverse speed at 16, again just slightly better than all of the other vehicles in this comparison. However, while the vehicle's power to weight ratio is worse than all of these other vehicles, what really sucks about this tank is it gets the same bad ground resistance as the VK4502B. That makes this thing insanely slow on medium and soft terrain compared to the E75, for example, and even the Moistion is faster on soft terrain. And if you put a turbo to increase the Moistion's medium terrain speed, it's probably going to be faster than the Tiger Mouse on medium. Accordingly, you must have off-road driving on this vehicle to mitigate that disadvantage. However, luckily, to go with this poor power to weight ratio and ground resistances, the vehicle gets the best turret traverse in this comparison of 20, and it gets the best track traverse outside of the E75 with 28, so not too bad. Although when we take into account the ground resistances again, we can see it's actually kind of the same as the Moistion on medium and soft, even with these advantages that it has. So how about the Tiger Mouse's armor? With a name like that, it's got to have some armor, right? Well, 200 at the front, 120 at the side of the hull, and 100 at the rear of the tank, so good luck any HE shells getting any kind of damage on that. With 300mm of frontal turret armor, 150 on the side of the turret, and 140 at the rear. This thing has armor for days. Let's imagine that it's getting shot at by 246mm of penetration. This turret is literally 300 thick all across. It gets a little bit worse towards the top of the turret, but unless you're above it, that's not really going to matter. It has a tiny weak point on top of the vehicle, and as soon as you're using your 7 degrees of gun depression, this is not showable. And you can easily see why this is a mouse turret. Now, it's more of a Moistion turret than a mouse turret, because do you see how it bows out in the middle here, which is a big disadvantage when your opponents catch you in the side. But if a Tiger Mouse angles correctly, it can still get like 300 to 310 millimeters of effective armor. And of course, when your opponents fire heat at it, then the amount of penetration they need will go up to kind of like about the 320 level, as long as you're not giving them a flat turret surface, which is why against heat, you should angle it slightly. and then you can get about 330 millimeters of protection, which will give you a 50-50 against tier 10 tanks, which will be nice to have. Now, the big issue with this vehicle is the lower plate is 130 and 200 millimeters of pen can go through it. And this is a big old lower plate, easy to be able to hit. But because the turret is rear mounted, that means that you could just easily get the turret like this and side scrape around a corner. And what are your opponents going to do? This is 246 pen at this situation. And remember, this thing will meet tier 7s and tier 8s. It is a monster. To put this into reality, this has better turret armor than a mouse does frontally. Although when it angles, it will become slightly worse than a mouse. But this is some chunky armor, boys and girls, to have on a tier 9 heavy tank. Now, of course, your skill in the Tiger Mouse will be to do everything that you can to hide that lower plate. But look, even if you over-angle the hull like this, you can actually get to a point where you still have 225 millimeters of all-round armor. So good blooming luck any tier 7s even loading gold going through the front of this. This thing is a true, absolute monster of the battlefield. So now onto the miscellaneous stats, and that is that it's got 400 meters view range, so it will never need coated optics, and it has awful camera rating as you would expect for a German tank. Also, this tank has a 15% chance to be set on fire, and trust me, the engine is at the front, so you definitely want to have preventative maintenance on your driver as well. And with that, let me give you my crew skill recommendations. Now, look, I'm on a press account, so I have all the crew skills, but I'll tell you which ones I would focus on. Firstly, I would take Brothers-in-Arms on the Commander, Repairs, Recon, Situational Awareness, and then if you can squeeze on Firefighting as well, I'd take that. On your Gunner, you definitely want to have Brothers-in-Arms with Repairs, and then all of the extras are just extras. You don't really need a fancy gunner on this, and to be fair, you don't need a fancy commander because it's not performing any of the extra roles. The driver is a crew member that I would invest in because you are going to want to have clutch braking, Brothers-in-Arms, Repairs, off-road driving, and preventative maintenance at a minimum, and most people want to have controlled impact to make use of that weight, and firefighting as well. In fact, I don't feel like this tank is competitive until it has a 7-skill crew on its driver. Radio operator, super simple, just 3 skills here. Situational awareness, Repairs, and Brothers-in-Arms, possibly firefighting as well. And your loaders have 0 pressure on them. You want to have Brothers-in-Arms, Intuition on both with Repairs, and then Safe Stowage on one and Adrenaline Rush on the other, and some firefighting as well, and no need for concealment. With regards to equipment on this tank, I would personally take improved hardening and turbo on every Tiger Mouse build, because otherwise this thing does feel very slow. And you want to have that turbo so you could go forwards and backwards just for shunting your opponents and also for pulling back round corners and making use of that awesome side scraping capacity. For the third piece of equipment, I would recommend vents, or alternatively, you could take a gun rammer on this tank. And if you really wanted to, you could use durability vents gun rammer for your really close quarters combat maps. And those are the 2 builds that I would personally end up using. So for field mods, firstly, you want to improve the ground resistances of this tank. Otherwise, you are going to be so slow on medium and soft, you are going to not want to play this tank. And because you're going to be taking the durability boost, you can sacrifice a bit of suspension durability. Next, you want to improve the accuracy of this vehicle. Then you want to improve the view range of this vehicle. Definitely take a mobility slot here because I would recommend a turbo on pretty much all builds. And you could always put vents in that slot anyway once you've taken it. And for the final field mod, this is where it gets really spicy. This is 2 extra kilometers an hour, which means that you can go at 37 in the Tiger Mouse with a regular turbo inside the mobility slot, which allows this thing to be rather lethal, at least until it's bogged down on medium and soft terrain. Anyway, I think that's quite enough jibber jabber. Let's go and get stuck in with the Tiger Mouse. Okay, so firstly, we're going to be rolling out in a juicy matchup against some tier 8 tanks, and we are going to be playing on Erlenberg. Now, you'll notice that I'm not using the turbo here. This is while I was still trying to figure out just how fast or slow the Tiger Mouse is. But I'm still going to keep this build, where I have durability vents and a gun rammer. This is for those real short maps, or where you feel like the engagement is won and lost in a single position. It's a similar kind of style that I take on all of my other heavies with regards to my equipment loadouts, where I feel on a Super Conqueror, for example, that I feel that the fight's going to just be all on one ridgeline. And if that's the case, I would invest all of my tank statistics in making sure I win that engagement. But you can see that the Tiger Mouse doesn't even get up to its top speed limit without that turbo of the 32 kilometers an hour. But oh my word, just look at this thing. It's kind of like, looks like from the back it's a Mouse /E100. It truly is a Tiger Mouse. Alright, so as you can see, pretty good accuracy here on the gun, but unfortunately, not quite good enough. And this was like the first time that I truly tested this vehicle with regards to side scraping. And you'll see that I've locked my turrets slightly, but I found a shot on the Scorpion G to be able to shut them down. And the E75 misses my lower plate, hits my tracks, and that's exactly what I want. However, these two E75s on the enemy team are quickly going to learn that trying to go for an almost impossible lower plate to be able to hit is not the right thing. And while we put a gold round right into the turret, oh, this is looking good, right? This thing, in this kind of a situation, I don't think there's any better tank. I can't think of a tank that side scrapes as well as this thing does that has 300 millimeters of turret armor. Now, of course, 300 millimeters of turret armor still doesn't do perfectly when you see that the E75 fires into my cheeks there, fires into my turret cheeks. And so I've lost a paltry 530 hit points to the E75, but I'm taking huge chunks out of the AT-15. And we've taken one hit, so we've lost a few of our starting 2,240 hit points. And we have managed to at least hopefully cripple a few of the enemy vehicles. Unfortunately, once again, the E75 manages to get me, and I am not happy about that. So you see that I'm looking for the overmatch. I'm looking for shooting just behind the ear, but I'm wondering, like, should I really risk it? We just bounced a GW Tiger, but I actually managed to get a shot into the lower plate there. And I feel like I've got the rate of fire on the E75. Unless he's using bond equipment or bounty equipment, I will definitely reload before him. So I'm looking for that shot into his lower plate. And hopefully we get it there. Not quite. Come on, buddy. Just give me that lower plate. Yeah. But unfortunately, he hits me again. And you'll see what they're doing. They're literally turning my cheeks into a dartboard. But they're having to spam gold to be able to do it. I mean, I'm spamming gold. They're spamming gold. World of Tanks wins within this regard, right? However, this is kind of as high of pen as you really end up usually fighting. It's like 311 and it's APCR and it's not heat. 311 APCR is meaty. It's like the equivalent of a tier 10 tank firing gold at us right now. Of course, 340 heat would probably be just a little bit better, but remember that doesn't have any of the normalization that the APCR shells will have, which is 2 degrees. So it's kind of fixing the angling of our turret a little bit. What I'm trying to say is that if you buy this vehicle, if you get your hands on it, you are going to have so many opportunities to just side scrape where there's pretty much nothing that your opponents can do. And whether that is balanced or not, yeah, I'm going to leave that to you to judge. And considering this is a premium tank, I think when we looked at the statistics of this vehicle, I would argue statistically that the tank just seemed a little bit better than the tech tree vehicles. I don't think exceptionally better, at least within every regard, especially on that medium and soft terrain versus the E75. And it does lose 1 degree of gun depression compared to the E75 as well. But remember, this is a premium tank. It makes bonds, it makes credits. A lot of people will just grind and grind and grind and grind and grind this vehicle. And I for one, am not looking forward at playing kind of like the IS-3 against this, because you're not going to do anything, really. If you load gold, you better find its lower plate. You're never going to pen its cheeks. Literally 0 chance. And because it's such a tall tank, aiming up at it is going to be a pain in the backside as well. Because you're not going to be able to see that cupola very easily from below. Good luck being able to reliably hit it when it is going to be farming you, just like I farmed that E75. And so that was 4,300 damage dealt, crunching against the enemy's top tier heavies in their dream scenarios as well. And while I guess 1,000 of it was against the AT-15 and 388 against the Scorpion, still, that was at least 3,000 damage dealt in meaty E75 hit points, so we destroyed 1.5 of them. And this game is still darn close, as you can see. I'm hoping that the Mil-2 and hoping that the CC-67 are going to be able to do some work. Unfortunately, the Su-130PM finishes off the T-103, and I'm going to make a greedy intuition switch out here to try and catch the Scorpion with a meaty HE shell and do 690, pushing our damage over to 5,000. A very decent game for any tier 9 tank, let alone one that is going to be making extra credits and bonds in addition, right? So I don't want to come to like the conclusion, as this is the first game of many that I'm going to be showing you today, but man, I'm not going to show you all of the games where I was just kind of laughing at tier 7s and laughing at tier 8s in this vehicle and making them feel helpless. I wanted to pick this replay because it really shows you the tank in its environment. This is a side scraper. It is a tank that is meant to side scrape and meant to brutalize its opponents through that process of side scraping. However, because its armor is just so crazy, if you get good at angling it and you've kind of like got that 240 millimeters of all-round armor, well, should I say effective armor on your side while also still having the armor on your lower plate as well, it's brutal. Also, face hugging in this tank is monstrous because of that 200 millimeters of upper hull armor. So unless they're firing gold directly down on the plate, and more often than not their guns are quite low so they're unable to do that, that's pretty crazy as well. I'd like to highlight, however, that this tank does have a bit of an issue with flaps. A lot of German tanks where the hull runs above the tracks and you can fire up into it. So if you see a Tiger Mouse crest a ridgeline against you, definitely take advantage of being able to catch it out like that. But man, I am not looking forward to having to play against these tanks in my tier 8, let alone my tier 7s. If I see this thing in a comet, what am I gonna do? I have to shoot it 15 times and I have to fire 15 gold rounds at it while it's pretty much AFK for me to be able to shut it down. I don't know what I meant to do in a T29 against this thing. I guess I load gold and have like 50-50 against its lower plate. Unfortunately, you're going to see that when you get caught with the turret and the Scorpion hits you, it's not too good. And oh dear, the Tiger Mouse of the lake, he died too young. Nevertheless, we still crushed it. We get a high caliber for that 5,000 damage dealt, and we make 62,000 credits profit even after spamming gold at the E75s. And before we died, we'd blocked 2,700 damage meaty. Okay, so now we're rolling out on Siegfried Line. And again, it's a map that I feel that the Tiger Mouse it can take its time being able to get into position. And when I'm there, I'm going to want to have the gun rammer for a little bit of extra firepower. So I'm having that durability vents gun rammer build on the Tiger Mouse. This thing just looks terrifying. It does look as if it could have been a tier 10 tank. Honestly, I'm surprised Wargaming didn't stretch out this idea and turn it into a whole new tech tree of vehicles. But then again, maybe that's a little bit bold because, you know, they've already got 3 German tech trees, of which 2 are, well, they've got 4 German tech trees, I think, of which 3 of them are quite similar to this. You know, you've got the Mouse, you've got the E100, and you've got the Panzer 7 as well to be able to go with. Am I just making up German tech trees? There are 3, right? There can't be more. It just feels like there's so many in the game. That's not a bad thing. I love my super heavy German tanks. And why do I love my super heavy German tanks? Because you can be cheeky, because you can drive out in front of people and still whiff in meaty shells like that. 530 alpha damage. When they buffed the E75 gun up to having 530, it just felt like it gave it that little bit of an edge that it previously didn't have. And look at that rate of fire. This thing does have some scary damage per minute compared to what you would expect on such a super heavy tank. It's weird because I'm going to have like mouse-like DPM. And in this kind of a situation, I don't usually take a gun rammer on a mouse. I personally think that it's far more important that I have the speed. But this tank, it's fast enough to not have to use a turbo, with that better reverse speed of 16 kilometers an hour, and the fact that with the field mods, you can end up going 34 kilometers an hour, I believe, once you've managed to get that extra 2. That's pretty wild. So the top speed limit of this tank is going to be 39 if you elect to put a turbo inside the mobility slot. So unfortunately, after putting 1 round into the IS-3, we were unable to put the second in. And because I saw that our team was taking north, I thought, well, I can't go around this corner and expose myself to the IS-3. But what I can do is use the fact that my team are harassing the northern location, and this building here is going to prevent the T-30 from being able to shoot me, and I can go and execute planned side scrape. And that is just what the Tiger Mouse wants to do. You want to find every opportunity to work a corner, you want to find every opportunity to side scrape against your opponents, and when you weigh 120 tons, you can just push an M103 into the perfect kind of position to hide your lower plate. Angle your turret a little bit, keep pushing him forwards, wiggle a little bit, bounce the CC Mark II. He's got 300 heat pens, so even if he hits me flush, he's only got a 50-50 chance of being able to deal with me. Crunch the IS-32. Actually, that was the Yank Tiger who managed to do that. Not me, so QQQ for the wasted shell for a second. Tornfang pushes forwards because he realizes he's getting absolutely dominated in that position and he has to be able to dig me out. But because I'm forcing my opponents to come to me, now they're not able to stop the T-95 from behind. I was thinking I can be able to over-angle against that Tornvang, but it was just that, over-angling. We put a big round into the CC Mark II, and now face-hug that Tornvang, plow him up. Is he going to shoot me in the cheeks? I'm going to angle a little bit. Let's see if he still gets me. He does, and he's lucky to be able to pen that because he doesn't have that much penetration. So good RNG for him. I overmatch him, and I'm hoping that somebody's going to be able to finish him off, and they do. And just like that, in the first 4 minutes of this battle, it's just a good game for any tier 9, let alone a super heavy tier 9. We pushed through, fight, fought multiple tanks at the same time, gone and bashed out 3,700 combined, but we still have 1,085 hit points to be able to do some work with. So good night, sweetheart. Ferdinand shut down. We have an IS-3 on our side. I'm not too worried about that because I want to try and go and farm the Leopard prototype instead. Actually, it looks like I was a little bit worried about that IS-3 considering he nailed me earlier as well. And we get our revenge with a pretty much average roll of 529. This thing is clapping. We bounce a T-30. If the IS-3 can have those hit points, I'm looking for something like the Leopard prototype as I come around the corner. And boom, baby, another 587 to him. The IS-3 fails to pen me even though I was pretty much side on for him. And now we're up to 5,700 combined in this tank. And the game is done in 5 minutes. Now, whether or not I should have taken the turbo in this matchup, I think it's just a matter of preference. I think the gun rammer was necessary if I had been under more pressure, but luckily we weren't. A lot of people will like to use durability, gun rammer, turbo on this tank, and I fully understand that, I respect that. However, I do feel like the vents for me, with the extra ground resistances, with the extra accuracy, with the extra aim time, just for me, I feel like on a super heavy tank like this that isn't so focused on the damage per minute because it does have good alpha damage and it can control the situation. I feel like that would be the best place to invest. And having like 2 builds where you have one with the turbo for your larger maps where you can still be accurate and flexible, and having one where you just want to be kind of like this brutal juggernaut like this seems to have worked out for me on a bunch of the maps that I've played. And there we go. That was over 6,000 combined. And what happens when you get 6,000 combined in a tier 9 premium tank without spamming gold? Well, you don't have to be a genius to realize it means a lot of credits, 103,000 credits profit, while having that German super heavy vibe for, again, that 4,600 damage dealt and the 1,500 assistance. While blocking, once again, 2,800 damage, enough to destroy this vehicle one time over. Alright, so if you haven't had enough Tiger and you haven't had enough Mouse, well, I've got a triple helping of gameplay for you today in the Tiger Mouse tank review. Look, when I did a first look at the statistics of this thing a few months ago, I thought it looked pretty good. However, having played it, I can tell you this is a German tank that I will probably want to play, I don't know, not every day because I think it's like a super exciting, super novel, super different kind of tank. But it will be one of the tier 9 premium tanks, which are tools that I choose to use. Now, this vehicle, I think it's going to be really good, but I think that it'll be frustrating enough for a lot of players with its lower plate that they won't truly enjoy it. But I still think that it's going to be, I think it's going to be powerful. When we looked at the statistics, it looked as if it was just as good as kind of like an E75, a VK, but as it's premium, I think it's going to end up getting decent stats. However, I want to show you also that sometimes things aren't so good for the Tiger Mouse. And it's nothing to do with that first shot. Meaty shell there. Bounce the BZ for 72 damage with his HE. Well, it's not a bounce, but practically no damage. And the Boras bounces 2 gold rounds off us. And now we're going to go and come around the corner for the 7772. And I realize, yeah, this was a little bit silly, really. Because I bounced my shell. I realize, oh, I'm not immortal. I realize, oh, I actually have to be respectful. And suddenly I'm looking behind me and worried about all the artillery shells coming my way. And that 7772 teaches me some respect. And there will be a lot of players who kind of, they either won't push the tempo enough in this vehicle, or they'll push the tempo too much, and they'll be punished. Luckily, the 7772 doesn't manage to find the 3rd shell. And because we've got forwards, it's looking like now tanks like the 1390 are going to advance. So the WZ-132A is starting to attack. I'm looking for more shots on this BZ-176, hoping that I can hit the top because I will be able to overmatch. And man, that was a misplay by me. I should have shot that 7772. Looks like he's a bit of a tourist going right through the middle of this Lakeville map. So I had other really good games that I could show you. Some of the ones crunching in against tier 7s that just really can't do anything. But this is the game that I wanted to highlight. That while this vehicle is fantastic, and I think it is going to be above average, I don't think people are going to think it's outrageously overpowered unless they're playing tier 7s and tier 8s. And I think tier 9s and tier 10s, especially tier 10s, will rejoice at having these, especially the tier 10s that have good pen. Now, I wouldn't want to fight this if I'm playing like an E70, if I'm playing a UDES 1516, but look, that's an HE round from the BZ176 going right through the lower plate and carving off 822 hit points. Luckily for me, I still do a lot more damage to him than he did to me. That's the third time I've shot that tank. I've done 1,500 to him, and he did, what, about like 1,000 to me with the few shells. I'm going to go forwards, and I'm going to ram the Peregrine, and I'm going to grind them up to stop them from being able to shoot my friends, pin them against the wall, hold them in place. I don't think the Peregrine likes this. They literally can't escape. They're not even tracked right now, but we're just holding them in place for the AMX to be able to finish them off. And the AMX gives me a big thumbs up. And I'm hoping that that's going to be what happens with Tiger Mouse. I hope that people look at them as this big meatball that's going to help them out and allow the other tanks to play like the support role. I just wonder if there's going to be... I look at it like this. I wouldn't want to be playing many tier 7 and tier 8 tanks around with the Tiger Mouse. Otherwise, this thing is going to be vicious to deal with because of that 300 pen. So, all in all, the Tiger Mouse. What do I think about this tank? What do I think about the Tiger Mouse? I think it's a very good vehicle. I think it's going to end up being incredibly strong inside the matchmaker. But again, like a lot of German super heavies, it's going to be matchmaking dependent. Meet your tier 7s and your tier 8s, get your farm on. Meet your tier 8s with good gold pen, get your cheeks farmed. I guess the worst thing that this thing will have to meet are tier 10 tank destroyers. Tier 10 tank destroyers are going to obliterate this thing. They're easily going to be able to hit the cheeks. The cheeks are huge, and even if you angle like this, they're still going to be able to launch gold just anywhere on the turret and absolutely farm this. And while it's not the slowest of vehicles, I think that the tier 10 TDs are probably still going to be able to keep up with it. So interestingly enough, when we take a look at the win ratios of all of the tier 9 German heavy tanks, the E75, the VK4502B, and the Moistion, we can see they have decent win ratios, with even the VK4502B, which one could argue kind of has way worse stats than the Tiger Mouse. Worse damage per minute, worse alpha damage, worse aim time, worse gun handling, worse gun depression, worse top speed, worse reverse speed, same ground resistances. It has worse turret armor, and the only advantage that it has is it has better camo. This is literally just a better VK, and the fact that the VK is getting a 49% win ratio suggests to me that the Tiger Mouse is going to be packing at least a 50, if not a 51 or higher win ratio average at tier 9 heavy. And what's scary about that is this the start of Wargaming's power creep with regards to tier 9 premium tanks? With currently the 114 getting 50.68, even the Stridsvagn K getting 50.68, and the Chieftain Prototype getting a 51% win ratio. I'll be surprised if the Tiger Mouse is not going to be the new best tier 9 premium heavy tank. And I guess the only saving grace is it's not going to be another BZ176 like last year. And as this is the first of the new 4 tanks inside the loot boxes this year, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel so you can also catch my reviews of the XM66F, the Type 63, and the Object 752 as they're released. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was my tank review of the Tiger Mouse. I really hope this was useful for you and helped you make better decisions as to whether you're wanting to get it inside the loot boxes this year. If it did, give the video a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments what you think about the Tiger Mouse. Do you think it looks absolutely insane, or do you think it just looks like it's going to be okay? And if you're watching this video as it goes live on Tuesday, I'm live streaming right now on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby, where you can get the QB Commander, so come along. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.